Greetings, honored listener, and welcome to my show. My name is Alex. I'm a digital illustrator and author, as well as the owner of the brand Art, which focuses on digital art, design, and especially storytelling. It's with this in mind that I wanted to create a space where the story behind art can be explored and discussed. So I wanted to create a little podcast dedicated primarily to those interested in digital art and design, though it may branch out into music and other creative fields in the future. The idea behind this show is the creation of a space where artists can share the stories behind their art and explore that sublime space where the conscious meets the unconscious. It's the space where art is born, in a way. And it's also the space that gives the title to this show, Active Imagine, referring to the technique of active imagination invented by Carl Jung. So Jung is one of my, I would say, greatest teachers in life, and I'll likely reference him very often throughout this show. His exploration of the unconscious is something that not only has changed and transformed my life extensively, but also inspired me profoundly in my work. So my intention is to give a voice to this space. We'll be discussing the creative process and the story behind the artist's work, as well as who they are and why they do what they do. And I think this is really, really important, especially now as we are very quickly seem to be transitioning into a world where it's becoming harder to see where art is coming from and who is it that makes it. I not only create art, but also love appreciating it. And I find it jarring sometimes to stumble upon a wonderful artwork only to discover that it was made by the new robots that are coming out, which sometimes can be very intriguing, but it does skip on the whole technique, as the Greeks called it. And I think art is really tied to the artist. And I think it's important to understand and explore that connection, to see it in the shapes and colors of an image and how that expression relates to the artist. Who can benefit the most from this dialogue? Well, I wanted to make sure that anyone interested in art, modern digital art, and creative expression in general can find a home here, but particularly young artists who want to make a career out of digital art, maybe in game design or in selling prints. I think they'll find some nuggets of wisdom and experience here as I aim to connect with and give voice to experts in the industry, or at least those who have been practicing and working in this world for a very long time. In particular, I am personally very, very, very interested in having dialogues with artists whose style I find very unique, original, and beautiful. Yeah, beauty is definitely something that I find extremely attractive. My first ever guest is called Kenneth Anderson, whose brand is called charactercube. He's a digital illustrator and artist based in Scotland that I've had the honor to meet personally and who has agreed to be the first to kickstart this dialogue. I have added some links below to his portfolio if you want to check out his work. Um, Not only I think he has a very unique style and design philosophy, but he also has a lot of experience working as an illustrator for clients such as DreamWorks TV, BBC, Nick Jr., Imagine FX, 3D Total, and Ravensburger on their new Disney Lorcana card game, which I believe just came out a few months ago. Kenneth focuses on character design and storytelling, which is what I do too. So I was very excited to be able to put this conversation together for you. Without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Kenny. Thank you so much for joining me on this,
No,
and thank you so much
welcome.
for giving me the opportunity to get this thing started. I'm really excited to see where this is going to take us. Um, so how are you feeling today? How are you doing?
Oh yeah, I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me, by the way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Um,
thank you. Thank you.
yeah,
So just as a way to start this, would you like to introduce yourself and your brand and what you do and how long have you been doing it?
sure. So yeah, I'm Kenny. I'm pretty much these days mostly an illustrator, but I'm also quite heavily into character design. I used to be an animator. I used to work in games as well. So I've been doing this for about. I mean, I graduated 2005, so since then, almost 20 years. Wow.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, just every time I think about that, I have a midlife crisis. Um, and yeah, so I do a lot of a lot of child friendly illustration. Um,
hmm
telling little stories and stuff. So yeah, my audience is the thing is my audience isn't really for my commercial work. My audience is for kids, you know.
Yeah.
But I do find a lot of adults like my work. So I guess my audience is quite varied, but yeah, my commercial work's all geared towards either children's television or children's books, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you and I had a little bit of an email exchange a few years back. I
That's right.
remember
Yeah.
this was yeah, this was at the time when I was studying game art and design, and one of my um things that I had to assignments that I had to complete was to get in touch with someone that was already working in the field to
Yeah.
gather some feedback and discover, you know, how it works and what's it like to be an artist and what's it like to work in the industry. And I remember that I sent a few emails. I think one of them I sent one to Hideo Kojima actually.
Oh,
He never replied to me, unfortunately. Maybe one day he will. But you
maybe.
got back
Yeah.
to me. So yeah, so we exchanged a few emails, and I remember that our conversation was really insightful. So thank you so much for getting back to me then and now to kind of have this dialogue. It's really, really important to me, and I think it's going to be um very beneficial
Yeah.
in that regard. So what I think this was a question that I asked you even in one of those emails. What made you want to become an artist, and why specifically a digital artist, you know, compared to maybe like a painter or you know, someone that maybe does art with like pencils or you know, traditional art, digital artists
Yeah.
versus traditional artists. What made you want to do this in the first place?
Um. So I think like all kids, I loved drawing when I was young. But I think I was just that kid that kept drawing because I just loved it so much. But like I didn't really think about it as a career until I discovered Wallace and Gromit, and
Right.
yeah, I remember like because up until that point I'd just drawn, and then one day I saw this advert for a Wallace and Gromit short because Christmas was coming up and they were always on at Christmas, and I got so excited. I was like, I want to watch that. And so I put it in my diary, the time and everything, and I watched it. I was like, this is amazing. And I think at that point, I was like, I want to do this. And I became really obsessed with like animation, like stop motion animation in particular. Um, and also, I think the characters and stuff. I'd always drawn characters. But yeah, at that point, I was like, I want to work in animation. So everything I did from that point on was how do I get into animation? Um, so I did all the art subjects in school and stuff. So yeah, I think it was Wallace and Gromit that inspired me to do this career wise. But it was tapping into that passion just for drawing, I think.
hmm
Um, and then in terms of digital art, like the only reason I do digital art is because personally I find it more practical.
Yeah.
I love traditional art, but it's just something I've grown up with because when I was like a young teenager, my dad would get me like some drawing programs for the PC. And so I'd spend hours on the computer just animating things digitally and drawing things. So I think I kind of grew up with it. I was probably one of the first generations to kind of grow up with these tools. Um, So it was kind of natural to me. It wasn't something I picked up later. And I was drawing at the same time on paper and stuff as well. But now the reason I do so much digital stuff is uh, it's faster. I've gotten used to doing it, and I can't draw traditionally the way I can digitally, just because I've invested more time in the digital stuff. Which isn't to say I don't want to do traditional, but I think it would probably, at least in the short term, really slow me down. So yeah, it's not really been a. I wouldn't say it's a conscious choice. It's just circumstance led to it.
Yeah, yeah, I can relate to that. I can relate to that a
Mm.
lot, especially the practicality and the speed of it. I think it's something that
Hmm.
really appeals to me as well. And I love that. I love the fact that there's the same kind of inspiration that I find in a lot of artists, usually cartoons or something that started in childhood. It was
Yeah,
definitely the same for me. Comic books, cartoons, superheroes, and then later on video games, which kind of
yeah,
led me down this path. And so it's fascinating. It's really interesting that you find that magic, when you're a child, and that kind of grabs you in, and you feel like,
yeah.
yeah, I want to do that. I really want to do that.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know what it was. I think because obviously I grew up with other things as well, like Calvin and Hobbes, Ninja Turtles, Postman Pat, all this stuff. I loved all this stuff. Monkey Island, computer
Mm,
games and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, but none of it clicked. I didn't click that I could make these things. It was just Wallace and Gromit that really had that as an epiphany moment. I was like, oh, maybe I can do this for a living. I think partly because it was made in the UK, right? Um,
Mm,
and I didn't realize, but some of the games I'd played, like Lemmings and stuff, were actually made in Dundee, just up the road. And because I'm in Scotland, so and you're in Scotland too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, but I had no idea that Lemmings was just made up the road. And when I found that out years later, I was kind of blown away. So maybe if I'd known at the time, that might have been the impulse. Um,
Mm.
and maybe I'd have pursued more games. I'm not sure, but this is just the way it happened. So it's fascinating. Yeah, how
Yeah.
these things can inspire you and you carry it through your life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned Monkey Island, and I think
Yeah,
there's a huge uh part of that game aesthetic that I see in your art. Would you say that that's like one of your biggest inspirations?
I think that's I think it's very fair. I wouldn't say it's conscious.
Yeah,
Yeah, but I think the thing about Monkey Island that really appealed to me was the humor, um,
right.
and just the kind of oddball nature of it all. Like it was just really silly, and I loved it. And I think I try and bring a little bit of that into my work. Um, Stylistically, yeah, definitely there's some stuff in there. Like the
Yeah.
the background is I love the kind of wonkiness of things. Um,
Yeah, I
there's
see
something
that.
nice about that. Yeah, yeah. I'd love to be able to draw like what was the guy's name? His name's escaping me right now. But I just loved the way he would draw something, the background designer.
Yeah.
But it wasn't perfect. Well, it was
Right.
the perspective was a bit weird, but it was perfect for that game. So I think that's probably definitely kind of influenced me subconsciously for sure.
Yeah, yeah. You mean the stylized part of it, right? That it's not technically maybe technically perfect as an art school would consider it, but it's got style.
I mean, I guess you could say that it was technically perfect because it suited the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, yeah, exactly. It wasn't real perspective. Everything was a little
Yeah.
bit wonky. Um, and it just yeah, it was just kind of perfectly suited the humor of the game and everything. I wish I could remember the guy's name. Um,
Yeah, that's okay. Are you familiar with a game called Psychonauts and the people behind that?
I It's ringing a bell.
Yeah,
Psychonauts.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't
Double
think I
Fine
played. I've not played
production.
it.
Okay,
Oh,
that's fine.
yeah, Double Fine. Okay. That's
Yeah.
probably why I've heard of it, because I've got a friend and we do a lot of game stuff together. So he's
All right.
probably talked about it, um, and that's why I know the name. But I've never played it.
Yeah, some of the quirky, stylized character designs are sort of like similar in that kind of direction of like, you know, quirkiness and then not taking itself seriously and just be
Yeah,
very light, you know. Um,
yeah.
that's
I'll,
something
I'll
that
add
I
that.
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna add this to my uh to do list to check this out because it sounds like right up my street already.
Oh, it does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you would be very interested in it. There's just something so special, you know, when you see something that's so kind of different, but different in in a unique, original and special way. It's like
Yeah.
that really interesting merging of art and creativity with something that
Hmm.
is uh you know that has a utility like a video game.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So talking a little bit about style, you do
Mm.
a lot of character design and you create entire illustrations and artworks with some of the characters that you design, which I think is really awesome. I'm curious, how do you do it in a sense that how do you what's your process? How do you start from a blank page, let's say, and how do you get to that final result? I mean, do you start with sketches? Do you start by creating the characters separately and then piecing them together in your artwork? Or how would you describe the creative process?
Yeah. I guess it does depend on if it's a commercial piece or a personal piece. Because
Right.
generally with a commercial piece, you've been given a list of things you need to do with it, and then it's just a case of problem solving it. And you might have character descriptions and all that stuff. But when it comes to like personal work, I find it really difficult to draw unless I'm really inspired by an idea.
Hmm.
Because someone's like, right, I've got some time, I'm going to draw something, and then I spend like an hour just trying to draw something, and it all turns out rubbish, and I just give up. But then sometimes when I'm really inspired and I see this image in my head, and I'm like, I just sit down and boom, I do it in like an hour and a half or something, and it's like it's not perfect, but it just kind of flowed because I had that inspiration. Um, so I tend to work best when I have those moments. Usually when I'm in the shower or something, I just see some image in my head. I'm like, oh, I need to draw that. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's the best moments because then you know when you put aside your work to do this image because you know if you don't do it now, the impulse is going to just disintegrate and you'll never do it. That's when you know you've it's a not even a good idea, but that's when you know it's something you need to draw. Um,
Yeah.
so in terms of characters and stuff, and I don't really design the characters first or anything. I'm kind of designing them on the fly as I'm
Hmm.
drawing.
Okay.
Um, so if I've got a clear idea of what the story is in the image, then I'm like, okay, I need this kind of character. I need this kind of character. What do they look like? So it's not like a massive process. And I imagine if you spent some time, or if I spent some time developing the characters a bit more, I could probably come up with something a bit more original for those characters. But I think you'd lose that impulsive creativity. You know what I mean? Um, if you go away and
Yeah.
spend like an hour researching something, I think it would kill my enthusiasm for the piece. Um, but yeah, commercial work I approach a bit differently, and I would spend some time referencing and doing all that stuff.
Hmm.
Um, try to get the designs right, especially if the client's got a particular vision.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned the image in your head, which
Mm.
is a point that I would like to explore just a little bit because that's definitely something that I am especially interested in. Um, there is that very abstract and kind of ethereal place where I think many artists live. I know I do. Uh, it's that place where these things just come to you, you know. And I think
Mhm.
any kind of artist, musician, or writer, or you know, anything, anyone that deals with the creative process can kind of relate to this. You know, there is a point where images, sounds, or scenes just flow through
Mhm.
you, and that is so incredibly fascinating. Do you wait for that part to come to you, or do you have maybe like specific things that you do during the day to maybe initiate that, or would you say that it just kind of you interact with it whenever it shows up?
Yeah, I would say I interact with it when it shows up, which
Hmm.
is which is good and bad. It's good in the sense that it feels a lot more, what's the word, um, real or not forced. But
Mm.
it's bad in the sense that sometimes it doesn't happen, and you might I might not be inspired to draw something for like a week or two, or no, I mean more than that, maybe 2 3 months, and I'm like, I mean, I can't right now. I can't remember the last time I did a new proper illustration, maybe like 2 months ago.
Mm.
So that's a bit of a problem. But then I'd rather not force it.
Yeah.
And I'd rather wait for those moments when I feel like, yeah, I really want to draw this. I think though it's partly about having some free time. I think when my mind's a bit more free to just kind of be creative and think and stuff, then these things happen more often. And if I'm
Mm.
too busy with client work or just life, buying
Yeah.
Christmas presents or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
then
Yeah.
there's no room for this inspiration to happen. So yeah, I think I need a bit more me time just to kind of encourage and nurture the kind of headspace that allows those things to happen.
That's a great point. I really
Yeah.
love that. Yeah.
Saying
Yeah.
that, like I find I get a lot of ideas when I'm walking, when I'm out for a walk.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know why, but I tend to I think a lot when I'm walking. Um, and I remember one time I went for a big long walk. This was years ago,
Hmm.
and I just started imagining this game. I think it was like a pirate game, and I started working out all the mechanics of it and all this stuff. And for this whole, I was like walking for over an hour, and I was envisioning this whole game in my head, and it was kind of crazy. And then I got home and kind of forgot about it. but, but I think it's just something about walking that allows me the time and uh, energy just to kind of focus on these kind of things. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that for
yeah,
sure. Yeah, yeah,
you do the same thing.
absolutely. Yeah, it helps with the creative process a lot.
Mm,
Yeah. Yeah, just being in
yeah.
a different environment, observing things, observing people. Nature is a really big thing for
Hmm.
me. Yeah.
Also,
Long walks.
I think it's partly because if I was just to sit down, just
Hmm.
sitting in a chair, it wouldn't happen. But something about walking, you're doing something and you're kind of focused on something, but not that much that you can't think of other things at the same time. Um,
Yeah.
so it's almost like it encourages the mind to kind of wander and explore and something. I'm not sure, but when I'm
Hmm.
just sitting in a chair, I'm like, okay, think about stuff, and it just doesn't happen. So
Yeah,
there's
yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? Something about walking, physically walking, it kind of encourages that. I'm not sure what it is though.
I think it's related to what you were saying before about leaving your mind the freedom
Hmm.
to enter that flow state.
Yeah,
It's when you force it, uh,
yeah,
it's
it doesn't
probably not going
happen.
to work. Yeah,
No, it never happens for me when I force it. I've wasted so many hours trying to force it.
yeah,
Um,
it's a good lesson.
exactly.
Would you say that you have any particular artwork among the many that you have that is maybe you're really the most proud of, or like one of that represents your style and your art the most? It can be both a client's work or one of your personal works. Um, Something
Mm.
that really represents what you're trying to achieve through your style and your creativity.
Unfortunately, I suffer from what a lot of artists suffer from, in the sense that
Mm.
I hate everything I draw. Or I like it for like a week or a day,
Right, right.
and then I'm like, I could have done this better. Um,
Yeah.
I could have done that better. That said, there's a few that I think really kind of represent what I do. So I think maybe we talked earlier about Land Ahoy, which is my image of like a bunch of kids on a pirate ship, and they're kind of discovering. I mean, the idea is they're kind of discovering land, um,
Yeah.
and they've got a treasure map and all the rest of it. So it's that kind of moment, and I think that kind of sums up what I like drawing. You know, kids
Hmm.
going on adventures, pirates. I like a little bit of fantasy,
Yeah.
um, but at the same time, I kind of like drawing people doing things and telling a
Hmm.
little bit of a story, you know. Um, and also style wise, like I'm not. I appreciate so many different styles. I love all the different styles. I love realism, and I really admire people that can do stuff that is really realistic.
Hmm.
And the same goes for people that do kind of more like a really simple, almost cut out style kind of illustration. I love all that stuff. But personally, the place I like to occupy is um it's stylized, but
Yeah.
it's kind of grounded in almost realistic lighting, almost not quite.
Hmm.
Um, so it kind of feels like there's form and um there's real lighting and stuff going on. It's not flat, it's not graphic, but it's not realistic. So um that's kind of the place I like to occupy. And I think that image, the pirate image, kind of sums that style up that I like.
Yeah.
Um, and you know when an image is good because, or at least has some merit because other people seem to appreciate it too. And that image was one of the ones that when I released it to the world, it got a lot of attention. A lot of people were liking it, and saying it was a nice image, well done, and all the rest of it. So I think that kind of says something, even if now I hate it.
I see. Yeah, 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 yeah. The
I
self-critical
don't,
voice. The
I don't
self-critical
hate it.
voice. Yeah.
I don't hate it, but there's a couple of things I would change, and
Of course.
simple things like the way the hat's sitting on one of the characters' head. I'm like, it doesn't feel right. Or I found an old sketch for
Yeah.
this that had a younger kid on the shoulders of another kid, and I thought that would have been a nice touch, you know.
Mm.
Um, and I'm not going to do a Frank Frazetta. I know he was famous, I think, for going in and repainting stuff on old paintings. I'm not going to do that. But if I was to do it again, I would definitely tweak those things.
Do you find that you get better with each new illustration that you make? There's a progress. Do you see the progress? Do you see the growth in your artistic expression with like each illustration?
Sometimes I think I do worse. Um, like sometimes I look back at old drawings, and like how did I do that? Like like I'm like, okay, what was I doing there? You know. In some ways, yeah. In some ways, I think every drawing's a little bit better than the last. In some ways, not necessarily, and I think it's all part of that getting in the zone, you know.
Yeah.
Because some images just flow and come together really nicely, where some don't, and I struggle a bit more with them.
Hmm.
So I think it's also partly me and my the way I don't put enough time into developing my skills. Um,
Mm.
I'm just kind of hoping they evolve, but like I think you need to kind of if you want to develop your skill set, you need to kind of put a bit of time into it, and I don't have the time. So
Mm.
unfortunately, um, there's things I'd like to improve on that I just don't, or they're maybe very slowly improving themselves as I do it.
Hmm.
But yeah, in some ways, I think things get better every time. But in other
So
ways, I'm like, nah, I used to do this much better, you know.
so you mean that there should be a conscious effort towards improving the technique or the style that you're using in your art compared to just waiting for it to happen automatically? Is that would that be a way of saying it?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, when I say waiting for it to kind of automatically happen, what I mean by that is not that you're just kind of sitting back and
Yeah.
hoping it happens, but like um, every time you do a drawing, you might kind of work on those things in the
Hmm.
drawing, or I mean, in the image. Whereas I think there's a difference between doing that and say spending some time to develop your skills outside of creating the artwork that those skills are for. If that makes sense.
I see.
Um,
I see.
yeah, yeah. So and yeah, so I'm not. I don't do enough studies. I don't do enough color practice or tonal practices. I don't do enough gesture sketches. All that stuff that is the groundwork of what I do as an illustrator. I don't do enough of that kind of like weightlifting in the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an apt parallel.
So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, any learning I do, any growth I do is when I'm doing illustration. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll try and do this, uh, like maybe I'll try and do better lighting or something. But a lot of the time, because of deadlines and stuff, you're like, you just don't have time to invest in upping your skills as you're doing this image. So it
Hmm.
doesn't work. Yeah.
Would you recommend that sort of practice to any young artist? Would you say that's the weights that you have to work with in your own gym kind of thing?
Oh, definitely. And I used to do a lot of that.
Hmm.
I'm not saying I'm at that point. I don't need to do it. I do need to do it, but I'm in the fortunate position where I'm kind of too busy to do it, either with
Yeah,
life or with work.
yeah.
But I think it's important, especially for artists who have developed some skill and are making a living. I think it's
Hmm.
important not to get lazy and to actually do develop your skills. But yeah, especially when you're younger and you're starting out, you need to put that time and effort in. And I used to do a lot of observational drawing. I used to do a lot of kind of illustration practice.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think when you're starting, actually, when I started doing illustrations, doing the illustration was the practice. Yeah. Um, I think nowadays, because everything was you're learning everything right at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas now I've got a process. I've got go to techniques, or I've kind of stuck in this method of working, which I know is going to develop a result that looks like my art. But it kind of you're not necessarily growing from just doing it. Whereas when you're just starting and you're finding your feet, I think every drawing you do, you're growing with it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I find that to be the case. Yeah.
yeah, do you agree? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to challenge yourself
Hmm.
with each artwork that you make, maybe try and make it a little bit different. But at the same time, there is something to be said about the automatic process of creative expression. This is what I find in my case. It's like the more the more content I create, the more artworks I make, the more they seem to evolve also through the process itself without me consciously trying to change it. Although I think
Hmm.
having that intention is definitely important. Maybe rather than intention, I would say it's allowing, allowing the creative expression to express itself in a way
Hmm.
that it wants to with each new artwork. So rather than effort, putting effort in trying to change something to make it better, kind of allow it to see where it goes. This is what I
Yeah.
found a lot in my creative expression. Definitely more through writing than art. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's a really interesting point.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me of something Bruce Lee talked about,
Yeah.
and I'm a big Bruce Lee fan. Um, I like martial arts and stuff, and especially when I was growing up. But I think he always used to talk about, especially in martial arts, like um, you have to be, you have to, if you go into a fight, I'm not
Hmm.
saying fight people, but like, he was a martial artist. If you go into a fight and you're not really sure how to punch properly, you're gonna waste your energy trying
Yeah.
to get your punches right and stuff.
Yeah.
So you need to have mastered that. So when you come to the fight, you just flow. He was all about the flow. He has this
Mm.
famous quote about, what is it? Before I started learning martial arts, a punch was just a punch, a kick was just a kick. Once I started learning, a punch was no longer a punch, a kick was no longer a kick. And then after a long time, a punch is just a punch, a kick is just a kick, right? I think the idea is you have to really learn the tools and then they just become part of you. And I think that concept applies to art. Um,
Yeah.
you have to kind of learn those tools. You have to spend some time learning, deconstructing, figuring it out. But ideally, you want to get to that point where it just kind of flows through you, and you're not thinking. You're not thinking how do I render the forms in this character? It just kind of flows through you. Um,
Mm.
so I think Bruce Lee applies to art as well.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Um, Speaking of tools,
Hmm.
in the current century, in the current year, we have access to things that the great Renaissance painters didn't have access to. Nobody
Hmm.
had ever access to before now, the past 10 years.
Right.
I'm not even gonna touch on AI yet, although
Hmm.
we will get there. But
Yeah.
what would you say? What is it like to work as a digital artist in this modern age? With everything that we have available from Photoshop to all of the various 3D modeling softwares that you can also
Hmm.
use to integrate your various 2D illustrations into, use them in combination. Photography is another thing. Pinterest for reference images. There is just
Hmm.
so much stuff. What, how do you find that? How do you find working professionally as a digital illustrator in these times with everything that's available? Do you find that overwhelming, or do you find that it's helpful, or do you find that you struggle to keep up? Because personally, that's how I feel a lot of the times.
I struggle to keep up. You find it,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I think I think when it comes to 3D stuff, there's always going to be that struggle to keep up because methodologies change. Things are always changing in the 3D world, especially when it comes to games and like new technologies and um, all that stuff. So yeah, as a 3D artist, I can see that being a bit stressful.
Hmm.
Um, as a 2D artist, none of it matters because
Mm.
like you've got all this technology and all you're doing is making art that you could have made with a pencil and paper. You know what I mean? It looks a bit different, but you could create. I could create all my images traditionally if I wanted.
Hmm.
They might look a bit different, might have a different feel to them. But really, all the tools and stuff, I don't feel any pressure to keep up because all I'm doing is creating something I could have made with any number of mediums. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
it's different when you're creating something that has to link into some technology. So when I worked in games, yeah, there's a bit more pressure there to kind of learn the latest software
Mm.
from a purely technical or pipeline point of view. But in terms of 2D design, even like commercial projects I've worked on, nobody asks, "Oh, are you using Photoshop? Are you using Procreate? What are you using? Are you using the latest?" No, they don't care. They just want to see results.
Right.
There's some cases where, yeah, you need to know the software. Like if you work in house and they use Photoshop in house, right? That's what they use. You need to know the
Yeah.
software, all right? But it's not a massive leap, especially if you're kind of familiar with digital tools. Um, I think we're so lucky to live right now. Um, like it's never been easier to get access to digital drawing programs. Like when I was growing up, like as I said earlier, like they were just starting to become a thing. And drawing tablets were just becoming accessible, and they've had them from like the 70s or whatever, but they were so expensive. They were used by engineers or whatever, I don't know. But they just became a bit more accessible to the general public when I was growing up. I remember getting my first kind of drawing tablet, and compared to what you can buy now, it was pretty rustic, but it did the job, you know. Um, so even I, in my short life, I'm not that old. I mean, I'm older than a lot of the young people starting out, but I'm not that old when you think about it. And I've
Mhm.
seen so much change in the digital um, landscape, you know.
Yeah.
Even just, I remember when home scanners became a thing, you could scan your line drawings into Photoshop. And now look, it's like, okay, you just draw them yourself into Photoshop. You don't need to scan anything.
Yeah.
And now you've got like iPads, you just draw on the screen or
Yeah.
Wacom's and all that stuff. So it's never been, I know like iPads are expensive, but in terms of um, the value you get out of them, they're actually very cheap.
Mhm.
Um, and like the accessibility of that to so many people now to access digital drawing tools. Oh, it's amazing. It's amazing what we can do these days. And also the internet is really cool, and it really makes my job a lot easier. Like I can't imagine the days where illustrators used to have to trek around like cities like London or New York with their portfolios and try and meet art directors and try and get work and try and get known. That would have killed me because I'm a little bit of an introvert. And I don't think I'd have fared very well knocking on doors and trying to get people to look at my work. But nowadays the internet makes things a lot easier. You can work from anywhere. Um, so yeah, technology has just opened up so many possibilities. And even in terms of like self-publishing, it's so easy to do that now. Like I just
Mhm.
recently did an art of book, and um, yeah, like 20 years ago, would I have been able to upload my work and get these books printed for a reasonable price, really good quality books, and then ship them all around the world? I mean, yeah, but it would have cost a lot more. I'm not sure the quality and the speed of production would have been as good as it was now. Um, and go back another 20 years, probably not. You probably couldn't do that, not easily, you know. So there's so many possibilities now, so many avenues for exploring the limits of your own work, and so many digital tools. Um, but yeah, the flip side to that is, as you say, things change so fast, especially in the 3D realm. New
Yeah.
techniques, new processes, new restraints. I remember when I was doing 3D in university, digital 3D, uh, and the things I learned then, some of it still applies today, but there's so many changes in how people progress. Sorry, how people what's the word? How they start a project, you know, how they do 3D modeling. The processes have all changed since
The
I
workflow.
learned it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The workflow,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
So things change in that realm a lot more than, say, the 2D realm, I feel.
I would say it's and I don't know if you agree with this, it's a little bit like a double-edged sword in many ways. And on this, obviously I could reference the overwhelming amount of content that is out there, the fact that
Mm.
it's just so uh it's so full of stuff. This is
Yeah.
what I find the internet as, it's like it's just it's so I personally find it very overwhelming, especially
Hmm.
just focusing on the digital art sector. There's everything there, and I think this is kind of a good place to touch upon the elephant in the room, which is this the birth of this artificial algorithm,
Hmm.
the AI generated images,
Yeah.
which is partly kind of sits at the foundation of why I wanted to get this conversation started with artists, because I think
Yeah.
we're entering a new age, and we're entering an age in which it's very important, I think, and I really do believe this, uh, to have an understanding of who the artist is when the art itself, the value of it is put into, I'm not sure if it's put into question, but it's definitely the way that we perceive the value of art and the beauty in art is definitely changing with the emergence of this new technology,
Hmm.
because the stuff that it can make is, it's incredible. We've all seen it, right? It's just,
Yeah.
it takes a few seconds to create some very technically impressive images, especially just keeping it in the realm of maybe like video game concept art, but it
Yeah.
can make abstract stuff as well. So when you have this, and this is probably what a lot of artists are wondering now, I know I am, if I have to spend 3 weeks on an artwork, and the digital algorithm can just create something that is technically more impressive than what I can do in 2 seconds, where does
Hmm.
that leave me?
Yeah.
So as a digital artist working in this sector, I'm really curious to know what you think about this. What do you think about this new technology, and has it had any impact on you as a digital creator, as an artist working in this industry? Has it changed something for you? Um, how do you find it? How do you perceive this?
Hmm. I've got mixed feelings.
Hmm.
I remember when I first kind of discovered it, I had a bit of a mild panic, and
Yeah.
then yeah, and then as time went on, I just started to kind of think about it a lot more, and I don't know where to start because I've got so many things to say. Let's
Yeah.
start with the has it impacted me so far? Not that I'm aware of. I think I'm in a good position because I'm in a bit of a privileged position because I've established myself prior to this. I think it could be a lot harder for younger people starting out to establish themselves, maybe. I mean, that's generally true because when I was starting out, generally across the board, the the kind of expectations from artists were a bit lower. I think the past 20 years, the expectations of people's abilities has increased as people get better, and the internet's been a great resource for people to learn and improve. And I've noticed a lot of young people are drawn so much better than when I was starting out. Um, so I think I got in at a time when it was a good time to get into this world. Um, I'm not aware that AI's impacted my work, but it might have. I just might not be
Hmm.
aware of it, either in terms of how much I can ask in terms of money. Uh, it's possible. I'll tell you, I have signed some contracts which have said you will not use AI in your work, which I think is quite positive. So
Hmm.
companies are worried about this, and they want to avoid any legal repercussions from using AI. So I've literally signed contracts saying I will not use it, and I don't use it, so that's not a problem for me. Um, so that's a positive sign. In terms of copyright law, I think copyright law is based at the moment as it stands. Kind of makes AI art a little bit useless because I think at least in the US, like you can only copyright images that have been created by a human hand. So
Hmm.
maybe they've yet to decide um, whether prompting AI generated art counts as the human hand or not. But I think at the moment, I think at the moment, copyright law would mean a lot of AI art cannot be copyrighted. And if you're a company and you can't copyright or you can't claim ownership of some art or a design or whatever, then it doesn't really leave you in a good place. You can't exploit that artwork. Um, so I think at the moment, copyright law uh, is probably on the side of of the artist at the moment. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Um, I'm against like wholesale scraping the internet, uploading people's artwork without consent, and I think in a few years we'll see a move to, and I think best definitely with the pushback from artists and stuff, there'll probably be a push towards opt-in, where you can submit your
Mm.
artwork to these databases and maybe get some royalties. I'm not sure. That would be a good situation, giving people that choice. Because I think it's theft in a way, yes. It's funny because every time you download a picture from the internet, every time you browse a website and it downloads to your cache on your computer, you're
Yeah.
technically breaking the law because you're copying images that aren't yours.
Yeah.
Um, but how do you function without doing that? So um, it's a tricky one because people put their artwork on the internet. Yeah, I think I I genuinely think there has to be a change from this model of everything's fair game to, unless if you're exploiting that information commercially, then yeah, you probably are already breaking copyright law. So um, I just there's a few lawsuits going through, and we'll have to wait and see what happens with them.
Hmm.
Hopefully they'll come out in favor of the copyright of the artist.
Yeah.
I'm not against AI in general. I'm not even against AI art. I'm just against A, it being used with other people's art without consent, you know?
Hmm.
And B, the idea that AI art is somehow better than human created art. Yeah, it's faster. Sometimes it might be more technically better, but is it better? Is there any soul in it? Have you, like, if you go into a bookshop and you're looking for a book for your kid? I'm not saying you've got kids, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And there's like 10 titles. 9 of them are created by AI, and then one of them's created by a person who like sat down, put their heart and soul into something, drew every page, really thought about it and crafted this book. I mean, which one has more value? So I think people forget there's a whole other side to art rather than just, oh, it looks pretty and it was done in half an hour. Well, an AI art case, maybe
Yeah.
20 seconds. There's definitely going to be companies that can see a way to exploit this technology, and it's going to probably decimate a lot of jobs. If only if the copyright thing doesn't stand up, as in it's deemed legal to just exploit people's work in that way, which I don't think it will, to be honest. I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see.
Hmm. Hmm.
But on the whole, I think there's always going to be that preference for human created art because, after all, people that consume art are human, and I think we relate to human related stuff. There'll be people that love AI art, but really, I don't know if everyone's going to be into it that much. Um, and then some people might not tell the difference and not care, but
Exactly. Yeah. That's a
it's
huge point. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know how I feel about that because I think at some level, yeah, a lot of people just go into shops, say, "Oh, this book looks nice. Let's buy it for a daughter or whatever, or kids." Um, I don't know. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
of
I
course.
my gut instinct is people are going to gravitate towards the human created stuff because
Hmm.
it's just something that's more special. I actually think like the more that people get disheartened and drop out, and I don't want people to get disheartened and drop out of the art world. I think that would be a tragic thing. But the more people that do it, the more that people that keep doing art and keep creating artwork, they're going to be more valuable because there's going to be less of them. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, unintended consequences. But um, yeah, my thoughts on this are complex, and I don't
Yeah.
really know all the answers. But in a nutshell, I think as it stands at the moment, copyright law is on the side of the artist. I've signed contracts saying I won't use AI art, which makes me think at least some companies care about this, and at least in the sense of they don't want to get sued. Um, and so I don't know if there's, I don't know if it's the end of the world. Like a lot of people are really disheartened by this. I worried about it for like a week, and then I was like, "Ah, you know what? I don't care. I just kept drawing.
Yeah,
I,
of
I
course.
want to. I'm going to give you another martial arts analogy.
Please.
So one of Bruce Lee's students, Dan Nozanto, um, he loves doing all these different martial arts. He's always learning something new, and so I think he was getting a lot of criticism from people, and I think he was asked in an interview, "What do you think of these criticism stuff?" He's like, you know what? I'm too busy trying to learn this to bother, you know." And yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
see the point. And for me, I got to that point. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to waste my energy worrying about AI. I'm just going to create art. I know I'm a bit privileged in the sense that I'm already making a living from it, but if it's going to affect everyone, it's going to affect everyone, right? It's not just going to affect people starting out, but yeah, I'm just going to keep creating art, and there's more ways than ever to exploit your own art. You don't need to get work with companies now. You can create your own IPs and sell them, and I think that's the answer in many ways: is create your own stuff, try and get it out there, because AI can't compete with that. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
If you're someone with a mediocre idea and you create some amazing AI art and try and sell this idea as a book or whatever, yeah, whatever. But if you're someone that's got an amazing idea and really does something really, put your heart and soul into it, and really special with it, I mean, it doesn't matter if you've got the tools to create amazing artwork if you don't have that seed of something special. So I think what I'm trying to say is I would encourage people to keep doing art and maybe try and exploit all these new digital technologies and stuff to create your own intellectual properties, whether that's stories, books, games. Um, and I think there's still a place there for making art, definitely. I
Hmm.
think things are going to change a little bit, but in many ways, it could be quite positive. Um, I don't know. That's
Mm.
my thoughts on it at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Tomorrow, I
you for
might think
that.
something different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you kind of answered my next question in a way, which is kind of related to everything you said. If, for example, a young uh, artist, aspiring artist, is listening to this and is wondering, uh, what do I do? What do I do in this
Mm,
overly complicated world? I would like to make a living of art, uh, especially digital art, because I think that traditional art is a little bit of a different sector to kind of discuss, and it's
yeah.
beyond the scope of this conversation. But as a digital artist, um, what would you tell them? What what would you say to someone that is just starting out in this, and maybe maybe they're trying to put their portfolio together, maybe they're trying to see if they can get a job as an illustrator for a game company, or maybe they want to pursue it solo,
Mhm.
selling their art as prints or things like that. And they look around and they see this overly saturated market, as well as robots making artwork. So what what would you tell them if you have any kind of advice, although
Yeah.
in some way you've already given it, but if
Well,
there's anything else that you want to add.
yeah, definitely. I would say that even when I was starting out, there was no AI on the horizon at all. Like,
Mm,
when I was a teenager, this is the 90s, right? AI was like, yeah, the AI is going to take all the, I don't know, jobs in warehouses and stuff first. And to a certain extent, I guess they did. But nobody expected at that point that AI art was going to be a thing in 20, 30 years. But even back then, the question on everyone's mind is, am I going to get a job? So nothing's changed.
Mm,
Um, that was my worry too. Is there enough work out there? Like, because no one understands the industry until you're in the industry. Um, and like it's only when I'm like 20 years into my career, I'm like, yeah, there's so many avenues for artists that I just didn't understand or realize when I was young and starting out. And I grew up in Scotland. Very few people in my kind of close knit, sorry, my kind of proximity, um, knew anything about this world. So they couldn't say, yeah, there's jobs, or nah, there's no jobs. Or they erred on the side of, are you going to find work doing this? You know what I mean?
yeah.
So there was always that doubt, always. So that's nothing new for one. Um, Two, I think there's a bit of a downturn in the animation industry right now, but the games industry in the UK is bigger than the film industry. It's massive. It's huge.
Mm,
That didn't exist 30 years ago. Wow, it kind of started in the 80s, 90s. Prior to that, I mean, that's a whole massive industry that just didn't exist 40 years ago. So who knows what's going to be there in 10, 20 years? And
mm,
if you say, "Oh, I'm out, there's no jobs," it's like, okay, but you don't know what's coming around the corner. You don't know what stuff is going to need your skills in the future. Um, on top of that, uh, I think, yeah, there's more jobs than ever, but at the same time, there's more competition than ever. And now we've got competition from, I guess, AI to a certain degree. Although I'm still not sure, like I said, copyright reasons and all the other stuff, whether it's a real, true competition at this point. But um, you've always got to work hard. You've always got to make it happen.
mhm.
And as I said earlier, there's more and more avenues for you to exploit your own artwork. You can make books yourself nowadays. You don't need someone to make them for you. You can create your own web comic, get it online. I mean, it's how many web comics have been made into feature films? I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So, um, that was a rhetorical question. There's been quite a few.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
so, like, Ninja Turtles started as an underground comic, and now like it's one of the biggest intellectual properties in the world. So, um, there's always been ways to exploit your own ideas, and there's even more now than there ever was. So I think that's quite encouraging. Also, never give up. Just keep going for it. I think you got to
Mhm.
go wholehearted into this. If you go half-hearted, then you're gonna give up and just go find a job doing something else, which is fine if that's what you want. But if
Mhm.
this is what you really need to do, I don't think you would give up. I think you just keep pushing at it, and I think it can take a while to get established. I heard someone say once that artists tend to spend the first half of their career overworked and underpaid, but
Yeah.
then they spend the second half of their career underworked and overpaid. Um, and
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think that could be true. And I'm just thinking of examples like in my own life, like when I was starting out, I wasn't earning a lot of money. Now I'm earning enough. Sometimes it's better than others, but I can
Mm.
definitely feel that as you get older and more experienced, you can start to ask for more money and you're doing the same amount of work, you know?
Mhm. Mhm.
So that
Mhm.
experience counts for something. But also look at people like Quentin Blake, very famous British illustrator. Um, I'm sure he went through a phase where he was kind of struggling or just starting out. And now, look, he's probably 18. I think for I think he could command very high prices. Is all I'm saying for his work.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of idea of you got to stay for the long term to really reap the rewards is is probably true. Um, I had one last thing to say uh, on the AI stuff.
Sure.
I can't quite remember what it was. What was the question again? Oh, advice for people starting out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think I've probably covered it. There's one little thing I've
Yeah.
forgotten, but I'm sure it'll come back to me.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, yeah, no problem. Was it in relation to AI art?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Okay. Okay.
Um, yeah, yeah,
That's
art.
fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, it was a really nugget of wisdom there that you'll never know. You'll never hear it. So I apologize for that.
That's okay.
Yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
I think what I'm trying to say is be positive.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like that martial artist guy I was saying about, try and just focus on what you love doing, and just get good at it. Get really good at it. And like, there's 8 billion people on the planet, right?
Yeah.
You only need to reach a small number of them to like develop a fan base,
Mm.
and potentially you could sell your own work, and you could potentially make enough to live on. All right. And I mean like a tiny percentage of that, like maybe even 1,000 people. Like, you don't need that many people that are fans of your work to kind of help you sustain yourself. And if you continue to create work and people like it, um, they're going to support you. I've got a few people that really support my work, and they're buying the books I've worked on, and they bought my art book, and it's really it's quite encouraging. And these people might appreciate art, but they're not actually other artists.
Hmm.
Not all of them,
Hmm.
anyway. Some of them are, but not all of them. So you don't need. There's a whole world of people out there that can appreciate what we do as artists, and maybe more of them appreciate it because they don't do it. So
Mm.
yeah, I think maybe my attitudes, maybe I'm a bit naive, but I try to stay positive, and uh, just focus on what you love doing. You know.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That makes perfect sense. Actually, it's really beautifully put. We definitely need a hopeful and positive attitude, especially in regards to what to any kind of area of life, I believe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really important to have that faith that what you do and the work that you put in is going to find its own direction.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think what you said about the fact that the games industry wasn't a thing and now it's so massive in the UK is
Yeah.
actually a really good point. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So if you throw the
No.
towel now, it's you
Exactly.
could potentially be missing out. Yeah, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
really good point. Yeah.
100%.
Um, okay. So if someone would want to reach out to you and check out
Hmm.
what you do, your work, and I think you mentioned that you have a book coming out, or is it already out, you said?
It's out and sold. It's gone. It's
Oh, oh,
yeah. I'm only made 50 copies. Because I was judging it based on. I did some teaser posts on my Instagram and stuff,
I see.
and I was judging. All right, I think I could probably sell about 50, so I ordered 50, and they all sold out.
Wow.
So yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you, thank you.
That's
I mean,
amazing.
yeah, yeah. I was surprised. I was like, oh, I'm gonna buy all these, and then I'll be out of pocket because it costs you money to print, right?
Of
And
course.
then I'll be sitting on this for like this stock for ages. But no, they sold out pretty fast. So I'm gonna do another print run, but it's actually hard work. You gotta sign
Yeah.
all these, gotta package them all, you gotta post them. It's a lot of work. But no, it was good, and I've always wanted to do an art book, and I finally did
Hmm.
it. So that was a something off my bucket list.
Yeah, yeah. Congrats, by the way. Like I
Thanks.
know that that's a really big deal.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah. I
awesome.
mean, I know you make books and stuff as well. So
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
easy, right?
I
It's a lot of work.
No. No, it's definitely not easy to put all those things together.
Yeah,
I think creating a book is a whole other uh work compared to just creating an artwork.
yeah.
So yeah, that's awesome. If someone would want to stick around and see whenever your next print is going to come out, where would they find you?
Mm. I predominantly use Instagram and Facebook. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't
I'll
really
make
use
sure to put
Facebook,
the
but
links
yeah, sure.
in the
Yeah,
description. Yeah.
Yeah, so Instagram's the main one, and then things get kind of synced to Facebook. But yeah, Instagram. I've got a website, but I don't really. It's just my portfolio website. It doesn't really update with news or anything.
Hmm.
I do have a Twitter, but it's a bit neglected.
Okay,
Um, Instagram's the one, the main one.
gotcha.
So, um, yeah.
Okay, sounds great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this conversation.
No,
I think
thank you.
this was awesome, and for your insights. I really liked the martial arts things, the martial arts references. That was really awesome. I really like
Um,
the when you can merge, these two
yeah,
kind of like separate areas, worlds, but in a
yeah,
way
yeah.
that like you can find a way that they merge and unite. I think that's awesome.
I've got one more martial arts insight if you want.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. Absolutely.
So where I used to train when I was a teenager, they had on the wall, it was printed, written on the wall, when in doubt, flow, right? And because
Oh,
the whole point of a martial art was you're
yeah.
meant to flow. If you, as soon as you get rigid, you're gonna get killed or whatever. Whatever. I'm not not getting killed, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but yeah, when I was started out and I went freelance for the first time and I didn't know if this was going to work, I kind of took that and I was like, when in doubt, draw, right?
Mm,
And so every time I had some doubts, I just kept drawing, and I just every time I had a little doubt, I was like, screw it, I'm just going to draw some, and it kind of paid off. It kind of worked. So I think martial arts has been a big thing for my personal philosophy,
yeah.
um, and
Yeah.
insight, and translates into work for sure.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And
Nah, thanks for
thank
having me.
you. Yeah,
It's
thank
been
you.
a
Thank
it's
you.
been it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it out there. It's been a lot of fun. No, it's been good. It's been great. Thanks for having me, and I hope you do really well with your podcast. You
Thank you
really
so
deserve it.
much. Thank you. Thank you for your time, Kenny. And yeah, as I said, I will put the links in the description and so people can follow you, can see what you'll be doing next. And I'm sure we'll be in touch again.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for tuning into this. I know that this episode has been quite long, so if you've reached this point, thank you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning into this. I really hope you enjoyed this conversation. I sure did, and I'm really curious to know if any of the wisdom shared here today was useful to you. Let me know. And what is it that they say around here? Like and subscribe. You know how the algorithm gods work. They certainly require their tributes in order to make this whole thing work. So I've placed some links to Kenny's work down below. And if you're passionate about digital art and want to keep up with what he's doing, please check them out. I've also included my own work, my own portfolio links, and some social media stuff if you want to keep up with what I'll be doing next. As I'm not only working on podcasts, but also doing lots of art, writing lots of stories. I have a little book out on Amazon if you're inclined and passionate about dark and dramatic sci-fi flavored with a lot of the wisdom I've acquired through life. And I'm really excited to see where this is going next. So I'll see you in the next one. Take care.